Hello and welcome to the Oak Grove Community Council General Membership Meeting for September 2021. My name is Joseph Edge, I'm the chair, and we have a few items on the agenda tonight, including an update from the Watersheds Council and a LUART review of the Oakfield subdivision that we've been getting some questions about lately. So first up, I'd like to give our board of directors a chance to introduce themselves. As I said, I'm Joseph Edge, I'm the chair, and I live in the River Forest neighborhood. Valerie, could you introduce yourself?
I'm Valerie Chapman, and I live on Evergreen Street, a block from the trolley trail.
Jane, could you introduce yourself?
Jane Civiletti, treasurer, and I live in the Fair Oaks neighborhood.
Rich?
Look.
Unmute, please. There you go.
Here we go. I'm Rich Nippon, and I live a few blocks south of the Fred Meyers on Oak Grove.
Mark, could you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, Mark Elliott, and I live off of Concord Road near River Road.
And our acting secretary, Danielle, could you please introduce yourself?
Hi, Danielle Lohman. I live on Evergreen and near the River Road area.
Thank you. And so to help with attendance tonight, we're going to go through and have everybody give themselves a chance to introduce themselves. So I'm going to stop sharing so we can see everybody. And then as I say your name as it is listed in Zoom, unmute yourself and tell us your first and last name and what street you live on so we can check you in for attendance. First up is, I believe that's Baldwin.
Yeah, my name is Baldwin Vanderbilt, and I live on Neff Road, about 2 houses away from Stringfield Park. I lived here for 42 years.
Thanks, Baldwin. Casey's iPhone.
Hi, I'm Casey Snowberger. I live on just north of Park Avenue.
Chris Simons.
This is Chris and Tori Simons, and we live on Whipple Avenue.
Thank you, Tori. Anita. You'll need to unmute yourself, please.
Thank you for that.
There you go.
Yes, Anita Blackmar. I live on Fair Oaks Avenue in Oak Grove.
Thank you. Dave Doback.
Dave Doback, live at Rose Villa.
Jean.
Gene Fifield. I live on Courtney, just east of, just east of River Road.
Jenna.
Hi, I'm Jenna Smith, and I'm in Oak Grove, Fair Oaks Drive. My family's been here since the 70s. I grew up in this house, and just about a little over a year and a half ago, purchased the property for my parents. So I'm back.
Welcome, thank you. I think I missed Gwen. Could you introduce yourself, Gwen?
Yeah, I'm Gwen. I also live on Evergreen Street, close to the trolley trail with Valerie.
Thank you. Mark Knudsen.
Sorry, Mark Knudsen, live on Cottonwood Court, just off a hill near View Acres. And I'm also a member of the board of directors of Oak Lodge Water Services.
Thanks, Mark. And then next up is Mark Jelanowski. Could you unmute yourself and introduce yourself?
New to Zoom. Hi, Mark Jelinski. I live at 16221 Southeast Whipple, and our property adjoins the new subdivision that's proposed called the Whipple subdivision. And this is my first time meeting with you guys. So thanks for allowing me in.
Oh, absolutely. Welcome.
Thank you.
And thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Pat Callender.
Pat Callender. I live at Roseville.
Thank you. Paul Savas.
Paul Savas, live off of Kronberg Avenue near Oakfield and Risley Avenue. My side job, I'm a Clackamas County Commissioner.
Thank you. Bob.
Bob Bohannon. I live on Southeast Laurie, just off of Courtney.
Thanks, Bob. Sue.
Sue Conahan. I live at River Road and Parkview Circle.
Thank you. Suzanne.
Good morning, everyone. Or not good morning. Let's try. I was doing two things at once.
I'm with you.
Yes. Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm Suzanne Wolf, and I live on East Avenue near Risley and McLaughlin Boulevard. I also serve on the board for the Historic Downtown Oak Grove organization, HDOG.
Awesome. Welcome, Suzanne. Tom, could you introduce yourself, please?
I'm Tom Civiletti. I live with Jane on Fair Oaks Avenue at Oak Grove Boulevard.
Okay, I think that I got everybody. Did I miss anybody? Okay, very good. Then I'm going to go back to sharing the presentation. Oops. Let's see, there we go. And we'll do our officer reports now. Guys, get everyone to mute when they're not speaking, please. And then Danielle, could you please unmute and give us the secretary's report, please?
Sure. So I have two updates. The first update is that the meeting minutes were delayed. That is my accountability. So I'm accountable for that. They're delayed. So what we'll be doing is sending them out with the follow-up email. And if you have corrections, you can feel free to send those by email. We'll make sure to get those corrected so we can have them approved. And then the next update I have is that I did go through and create a nice spreadsheet with all of the members. I focused on the members who are not currently voting members to see that, make sure that we have are entering new voting members in. So I wanted to make a couple of announcements as people who've recently become voting members or are about to. So one new voting member who can vote this meeting is me. So that is 6 meetings. 5 is when you become, after your 5th meeting, you're eligible. At your 6th meeting, you can vote. So I've hit that one. And then we have a couple people who are really close. No, not here today though, but I'll go ahead and actually, that's not true. Suzanne Wolf, I have you for 5 meetings. So your next meeting will be voting member. And then I also have Kathy Nidek, who I don't have as on tonight. And then Craig Van Valkenburg is a representative of Willamette View. So he'll be eligible at the next meeting he attends as well. I want to let you know that I did use this. We've kind of had to compile through I use old meeting minutes and some of our old records. So if you're not already a voting member and you think that you've hit the 5, or even 6, let me know and I can double check and I'll go back through all the records and make sure, because I want to make sure that we have consensus on that.
Awesome. Thanks, Danielle. Jane, the treasurer's report.
The report is unexciting. We have had no contributions in, we have had no expenses. Therefore, our grand total remains at $1,668.38.
Thank you. And with that, we'll get right into our program. And so our first presenter tonight is Neil Stolman, the Executive Director of the North Clackamas Watersheds Council. And I'd like to invite Neil to unmute and take it away.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to share my screen, and thank you so much for the opportunity to come and talk about what's going on with the watersheds. Hopefully you can see a big picture of a great blue heron on your screen. And if someone nods, then I'll know that I've got it done right. All right. So thank you. So yeah, this is, how long do I have, Joseph?
Probably about a half hour.
Okay, great. So I'm just going to kind of give you a little bit of a rundown on not only what we do and why we do it, but really also on what Valerie asked for, which is what's coming up and what's going on in the watersheds. And obviously we've had a pretty strange summer, and that's raised a lot of questions about what's going on with our streams, and we kind of speak to that a little bit, and really kind of where we go from here. So first thing I want to do is I want to acknowledge 4 people who are on the Zoom call. So Joseph Edge and Bob Bohannon sit on our board. We are organized under the Oregon Watershed Council system, which created watershed councils to be a community-based organization with board members from both different agencies that are involved in how decisions are made and citizens who are interested in stewardship. And the idea basically was to create a collaborative framework where we could all work together to improve streams. So Bob and Joseph are part of our board. The other 2 folks who are in this room are Mark and Paul, with their agencies of Oak Lodge Water Services and Clackamas County, which are key partners in all of our work through Water Environment Services, North Clackamas Park and Rec District, and our partnership with the district, and they help us do what we do. So thank you to all of you. I'm going to dive into it, and I believe in audience participation. So just kind of here's 4 questions for you, and they're true or false. So they're pretty easy. So one of them is true or false. Coho and salmon and steelhead have been found spawning east of I-205 in Mount Scott Creek. Number 2 is true or false. Just think about it in your head. By 2040, there will be roughly 60,534 or so more people living in the urban portion of unincorporated Clackamas County than there are today. The third one is when you take an area and cover 75% of it with pavement, 55% of the rain runs along the surface, i.e., as opposed to, for instance, soaking into the ground. And the fourth one is most brake pads contain copper, which is toxic to salmon, trout, and steelhead. So what do we think? Do you think some of these are true, some of these are false, all of them are true, all of them are false? What's a guess? Yeah, probably already.
All true, I see.
Let's go all true.
Quiz. They're all true. So coho salmon and steelhead are found east of 205 on Mount Scott Creek, trying to spawn shortly after the 4 or 5 days a year when the Willamette River gets high enough that they can actually jump over Kellogg Dam. It doesn't happen very often, but when it does, we get reports and photos from the areas around Mount Halbert and Happy Valley, basically saying, "Hey, look what I saw in the creek," which means they can make it through the 205 culvert and under 82nd Avenue and through all of that kind of developed zone to find that good habitat, and that's a huge sign of potential.
Neil.
Hey, Neil.
Will in fact be yes.
Do you encourage?
We're not seeing your slides advance.
Oh, you're not. Okay, let me.
I have a question.
Did that do it?
Yeah, that worked. Did you have a question for what he's talking about right now, Mark, or did you want to hold it
Yes,
for a
I
little
did.
bit later?
I had a question regarding what you call Mount Scout Creek.
Yes.
Is that the creek that runs between Mount Scott and Mount Talbot? It used to be called Sabin Creek.
No, that's still Sabin Creek.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll show you on a map in a moment.
Okay, never mind. Thank you.
Yeah. So the other one is, the third one is, or second one is, yes, there will be a lot more people living here, and all of those people are going to probably want a place to live and places to buy groceries and places to work. And that means there's going to be obvious strains on our infrastructure, which makes number 3 kind of a challenge, which is to say, when we start to modify our watersheds and pave them and water runs along the surface, we tend to get more flooding, and we tend to get more water when it rains running through the creeks and a lot less water soaking into groundwater that provides water in the summer, like and early fall, like now when it doesn't rain much, and that can cause problems for the creek. So how we manage those two things together is a big challenge for us all. And the fourth one is most brake pads do contain copper, which does mess up the navigational sense of salmon, steelhead, and trout. And that means that either we have to stop using our brakes, which I wouldn't recommend, or we have to find better ways to do more treatment of the water that runs off roads, because it is toxic to a lot of what lives in streams. So that's just an introduction to what we do. And did that advance for you folks? Okay, great. The key thing here is our goal is basically to restore our streams for fish, wildlife, and people. Obviously, we found out during COVID, when we're not traveling and we're not going to lots of events, how valuable it is to have nature close to home, especially when we can't go to gyms to exercise, how many people really do want to use our parks and our bike paths and our trails for, just staying healthy. So I don't think I'm kind of saying anything shocking here, that we all want healthy watersheds and people who are engaged at various levels of stewards. The council is kind of, again, the meeting ground for all of that. And we are a private nonprofit. We're a 501c3, so we don't own anything. We don't regulate anything. We're not the government. We can't write laws and policies. But what we can do is we do on the ground restoration. We do an increasing amount of science to both guide our restoration work, but also to kind of answer some of the questions that we've been asking for a long time about our streams. Like, where do the fish try and get to? Can they get over this barrier or not? Those sorts of things. We do engage the community in all this work in different ways. And we also engage in policy and planning. And the decisions that are made by agencies like Clackamas County and Oak Water Services and many other entities have a huge impact. So we participate in that and try and provide some best practices and things like that. And then the other big project we work on is trying to get Kellogg Dam. So to go back to the question about where these creeks are. So this blue area in the upper right is Mount Scott Creek. We work to restore 5 watersheds. So Kellogg Mount Scott is the biggest one. It starts up in Happy Valley. Kellogg Creek comes in from around Johnson City. They meet in unincorporated Clackamas County, flow through Milwaukee, and come out in Milwaukee Bay Park, right next to the mouth of Johnson Creek. And south of that is River Forest Creek, which flows into River Forest Lake and then under the road into the Willamette. And south of that is Boardman Creek, and south of that is Rainierson Creek. And then don't forget the obvious one, which is the east bank of the Willamette River from Meldrum Bar to Milwaukee Bay. That is our territory. All watershed councils have kind of a geographic scope. Our territory is small compared to some other watershed councils, like, for instance, the Road Basin in Southern Oregon, which is obviously much more rural. or the Sandy River Basin in eastern Clackamas County. What makes us pretty unique is we have 165,000 people living in this shaded area. And that is the population of Eugene. Our watersheds would be the fourth largest city in Oregon if it was a single income. So this is a picture taken just upstream of Walta Vista. And this is a view you've probably seen, many things similar, that shows a lot of the challenges that urban streets face. So there's some impervious surface and stormwater that is coming off of this house's driveway and roof. There's not a lot of shade on this creek, which means it's really vulnerable to hot temperatures and the creek warming up. There's probably pollutants that come off of kind of non-point source pollution, which is the fancy word we use for anything that doesn't come out of a pipe. Like if this resident, and I don't know who they are, they have a lot of grass, and if they put herbicide or if they put fertilizer on their grass and that runs into the stream, it's going to end up in the stream. We tend to have a fair amount of floodplain development in the watershed, and then we have a fair amount of streams that look like this, that are they're channelized, they're dug into a ditch because they have altered hydrology from all of that pavement. Rivers are really meant to wander and move across their floodplain and change course, and things that are physics tells them to do, but human settlement doesn't always let them do that. And we have things like fragmented habitat and fish barriers. That culvert is probably at least a partial barrier to movement of, say, juvenile salmon and trout. And we have fewer natural areas. Again, these are the standard challenges that most suburban streams face. The good news is that all of these pictures, and a lot of ones that were taken like it, were taken within our watershed. On the bottom left, we have a coho spawning up in Mount Scott Creek that was taken in 2008. The beaver, the hummingbird, the dragonfly, the cute baby coyotes, those were all taken by one of our board members who lives along Boardman Creek, and people hiking at Mount Talbot. And again, there's a lot to be, at the same time as there's challenges, there's a lot that we're really proud of in the ways that we have some pretty healthy nature in our urban area, even if it's not even if it does have some challenges. So here's what we do. So we do a lot of restoration. We do a lot of management of invasive species, replanting them with native species. The program called Streamside Stewards. There's a couple of folks on the call here who are part of it, where we have about 68 sites in the general Oak Grove area, about 165 throughout our territory, where we are revegetating streams that don't have shade over it. And the goal is really to shade that water, keep it cool enough that it can have a high oxygen content. It's really important for fish and aquatic life. Provide erosion control, filtration of chemicals, provide a source of woody debris that's really important to habitat, and really build a sense of stewardship. And that program is probably what most people know us for because it's been going on a long time, but it's not the only thing we do. The other thing we are doing is we have a grant from the state right now to do a lot of revegetation at the what we call the Hull Street property, which is owned actually by the North Clackamas Park and Rec District. That is the headwaters of both Rainierson and Boardman Creek. And the past couple of years, we've been mostly trying to cut back the invasives, and we're aiming to get it planted this January through March. And then a big project that we are going to be designing in the coming year and constructing in 2022 or 2023 is at the mouth of Boardman, where it hits the Willamette. And this is a really important site for not only the salmon in our watersheds, but all the salmon that are migrating through the Willamette Basin. Basically need to stop at these creek junctions. So we're going to be doing a lot of bringing in a lot of large woody debris, including some trees that we're hopefully getting from the recent wildfires used for restoration projects. to improve the habitat there. And this is eventually what it'll look like with big log jams that used to exist in all of our streams, kind of going all the way up the mouth of Boardman Creek, that will allow salmon and steelhead, especially in the juvenile phase, to use that area better. On the science end of things, we are in the midst of the development of a 10-year watershed action plan. That'll basically be a 10-year restoration strategy that is bringing together a lot of scientific information and a lot of different stakeholders who say, well, okay, we got a pretty big area with a lot of different things we could work on. What do we need to work on? We have a quote unquote preliminary list of 39 projects. We obviously can't hit all of them, but some of our partners are working on some of them, and we're going to really prioritize our actions and have a roadmap for how to get the most restoration done. The other kind of things we're doing is we're doing a shade analysis of Boardman, Rhynearson, and River Forest Creek using drones to basically fly them around with infrared cameras and 3D cameras that will basically assess where there is shade and where there isn't, so that we know what areas to target for our next set of plants. Where are the places where the stream really does need to be shaded, especially south and west facing slopes that tend to get a lot of sun, and really help us target our work. In the coming year, we're also going to be doing a lot of this. We're going to be getting a lot more temperature data. We know that Boardman and Rhynearson Creek, as well as Kellogg Creek, come into the Willamette colder than the Willamette, and that's really critical. But we don't know why, and we don't know where that cold water comes from. Are there springs? If there are springs somewhere, it isn't really reported. So we're going to be putting up a bunch of monitoring stations that collect continuous data. We're going to walk around with a really sensitive probe and see if we can really make sure we can find and identify those sources of cold water. The other thing that we do is really try and help people understand how streams work and what they can do to help them function better. A lot of times we've inherited a mistaken understanding of what our streams look like, because none of us lived here before 1850, when we looked at, when streams looked a lot more natural. So streams usually have, naturally in our area, a stream would have a ton of downwood, lots of beaver dams, lots of wetlands, lots of side channels, lots of kind of braided shifting courses that move whenever there's high water. And obviously, again, we built a city or so around here. So we're trying to help people understand how watersheds work and what they can do. And some of those are pretty simple, like not washing your car on the sidewalk or over the storm drain, because I can tell you right now where that soap's probably. And what you can do to do things like put rain gardens in and capture the water off your roof. There's a whole variety. The other thing we're probably most known for, just kind of by your average casual observer, is the campaign to remove Kellogg Dam in Milwaukee. So Kellogg Dam was built when the guy on the right, whose name was Abraham Lincoln, was running unsuccessfully for the US Senate in the 1850s. It hasn't served any purpose since the 1890s, but was actually somehow remained in place. And then now it's built into the highway bridge that is also earthquake vulnerable. So we've been working with the congressional delegation and the state agencies and the governor's office, trying to build momentum for restoring a natural condition for Kellogg Creek. And it'll be very, very exciting right now. On the policy and planning side, this is a photo. We also know that those 60,534 more people are going to be living here, are going to probably want to live somewhere, and they're probably going to want to live somewhere pleasant. And pleasant usually means not polluted, near open space, and lots of other good things. So we work with various government entities to help basically advocate for plans that will make our development and our meeting of kind of the housing needs more compatible with healthy streams. These two pictures have the exact same number of housing units. It's just that one has a lot more room for nature in it than the other. And one has a lot more concrete and a lot more bigger, wider streets, but actually no more houses than the other, than the picture on the left. And those are decisions that our government makes. And obviously the two representatives of here. The nitty gritty of the stuff that we work on are things like the Milwaukee, we're tracking the Milwaukee comp plan implementation. Happy Valley and Milwaukee are working on their tree codes and we're commenting on those. We're part of the refinement and the targeting of purchases for the Nature for All bond that was passed for Metro in 2019. Joseph is part of, is tracking the National Flood Insurance Program BioOp. We're working with Wes on the design of a flood attenuation project at Three Creeks, City of Gladstone planning for Olson wetlands, and making sure that the agencies that do all this work actually have money to do it. It is one thing to say, great, we want to restore these watersheds, but if there's no money in the budgets for watershed restoration and there's no ODFW biologist to assess a fish passage barrier, then it's not going to get assessed. So these are all kind of the nitty-gritty decisions that tend to get made in public buildings like Milwaukee City Hall and tend to be a little on the dry side sometimes, but they're actually really important. And that's going to control what the river corridor looks like here, whether it's the quote unquote ditch that it is in the top of this photo, or whether it's actually a pleasant place to hang out and bring your kids and ride your bike. So what's coming? Well, three things that we can be sure of. On the upper right, the heat wave that we had, I'm pretty sure we all know that's probably not the last one we're going to get. Our summers are getting hotter and drier, and we're going to see more of that. And on the bottom right, the picture of the flood on Lake Road in Milwaukee, we are also getting more intense winter storms. And some of that is a factor of climate, and some of that is a factor of all that impervious surface. And those are a double whammy combined with that. So hotter summers, lower water in summer, higher water in the winter, flashier systems. What we saw this past summer was really interesting. The Willamette hit 74 to 77 degrees, right around that kind of heat dome. That is getting toward lethal death levels for cold water fish like trout and salmon. And what the fish do when that happens, and this happened already, this is not the first time we've seen this, it happened in 2015, is they duck out of the main stem Willamette for a breather, and they start to try and look for places to go up the tributary stream. They go up Johnson Creek, they go up Boardman Creek, they go up Reinierson Creek. They'll go on the other side of the river. If they could get through the culvert, they go up through Tryon Creek as well. And this is all returning adults on their way to spawn in the Sac and the Clackamas, the Mackenzie, the Malala, et cetera. With the Boardman project, we've been having a resident who's a meteorologist measure the temperature and comparing the temperature in front of their dock on the Willamette and right at the mouth of Boardman and in lower Boardman Creek, right above the Willamette. And it's consistently coming in at about 5 to 7 degrees colder than the Willamette itself. So that's what, the fancy word that biologists use is cold water refugia. And that's going to be really important. The other thing is going to be finding ways to keep water in the stream in the summer. And that means less paving or more advanced green infrastructure ways of slowing down the movement of water from when it rains into the stormwater system. The other thing we also know is, again, we're going to see population growth. It's no secret that a lot of it's being driven by housing affordability in central Portland. No one expects that to really change. So we know there's going to be a need to accommodate more people as well as some more extreme weather. Part of what we are doing is this confluence strategy around these confluences with the Willamette. So we're working on Boardman Creek. We've identified the next project we want to do after that is at the mouth of River Forest Creek. A big project was completed at the mouth of Rynearson Creek in 2018 to allow salmon back up in there. Clackamas River Willamette Confluence had a big project done. We are working obviously on fish passage over Kellogg Dam. And you all know about the Boardman wetlands, which is going to really improve the hydrology of Boardman Creek in general. So that is one of the ways that one of the priorities that was really kind of taken on a new role in how we kind of approach all of these changing conditions. We can do this together. It's going to be a challenge to figure out how to accommodate more people with less concrete and more water coming in weirder patterns at different times of the year. You have 4 things that you can use to make this happen. And one of them is you have a voice. So I think it's fair to say that the more people chime in when the city of Milwaukee is starting to talk about tree protection, or when Wes is updating their stormwater standards, the more they hear from people who say, hey, it's really important that we maximize the value of healthy streams for what will basically be the next decade at least. We know that those are heard more, the more different people say that. We maintain an email list to share that information with you and tell you how you can participate. And it's actually not that hard. The other thing is you can use your time. We are a staff of 1 right now. We're getting ready to hire a second person. That's not a lot. We rely really heavily on not only our board members, but volunteers who serve on committees, task forces, help with different projects, manage our Facebook page, all of the things that go into making our work possible. And the other thing you can use is your wallet. We are a nonprofit organization. We obviously depend on contributions from both individuals and from grants to get our work done. And the 4th thing, and this is coming right up, that you can use is you can use your hands. We have a native plant sale coming up on October 15th to 16th. And we need some volunteers, especially the day before, people to come up to pick up their plants to help prep everything and sort them. And that's October 15th and 16th. And if you take a picture of that web link and sign up online and help out for a few hours, and you'll learn a lot about plants by doing it. And that is my quick kind of rundown on what's going on at the Watershed Council and in the watersheds as well. And I'm going to stop the screen share and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Savas?
Yeah. Neil, thank you for a great presentation. Really appreciate the work you're doing. I would encourage people to get involved. It's a lot of fun to get involved in watershed projects around the area and get out for a day or 2. I have a question, if you can enlighten us. I've heard differing opinions when it comes to impacts to the watershed with development as we urbanize. And the argument between having areas with sidewalks and curbs, which help direct those flows right into the watershed or the streams and the river, versus the safety elements of having a sidewalk for pedestrians. We're slated to see a lot more density. I think you spoke to that earlier. So just your thoughts, if you could.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Savas. That's a really salient point, and one of the conversations we've had at multiple levels is how do we have all the things that we need for urban infrastructure, or as well as not adding to that impervious surface component of it. The short answer is it is definitely possible to do both. And one of the places I like to take people on tours is Milwaukee Bay Park, because when people are in the parking lot at Milwaukee Bay, they're usually not aware that they're actually standing on and driving their trucks on something called pervious pavement. which looks like regular pavement and certainly appropriate for things like sidewalks that don't have big, heavy vehicles on them, where the water actually soaks through the pavement rather than running into the storm drain. The other things that can be, there's a lot of that kind of fairly rapidly improving green infrastructure, whether it's bioswales, eco roofs, detention ponds, that can treat that stormwater in ways that don't take up as much space, because then you don't, if you have pervious pavement, for instance, you don't have to build a detention pond for your stormwater because the ground is your detention pond. And they don't take up as much space. They provide obviously safe pedestrian, walkways that we all want. So I point mostly to the fact that those types of techniques need to be adopted more widely and adopted as kind of the baseline rather than the kind of special demonstration project. We know how to do it now. They're not really that new. The other part of it that I think becomes really important is how do we retrofit some of the gray infrastructure that was built in maybe the 1930s or 1940s when we weren't really thinking about this sort of thing. And we're just kind of like, hey, let's build Highway 99E 1932 and move trucks and it'll be great. And didn't really address this, didn't really think far enough ahead at the time and didn't have the technology or the knowledge. So we've got to build the new housing and the new infrastructure in a way that is creek friendly, which we have the ability to, and technology to do, and it just needs to be kind of incorporated into the planning code and the zoning and the incentivization for developers. And then there is the other challenge of how do we go back to some of our old aging infrastructure and make it more modern and frankly more pleasant to be around. As anyone who is driven down 99E probably speaks.
I have a
Thanks,
question.
Neil. Mark, go ahead.
Neil, yeah, my name is Mark Jelinski. I appreciate what you're doing. I have a question. I grew up on Sabin Creek during the time of Wally's Dam and from about 55 to 1970, 75. Is that creek dead for all practical purposes at this point in time?
To be honest, I don't know a ton about Sabin Creek, and the reason I don't know that is actually that Sabin Creek drains to the Clackamas River itself. So our watershed council, kind of because we focus on the Willamette and the creeks that drain into the Willamette, that is the territory of our sister watershed council, the Clackamas River Basin Council, and they're going to know more about it. I don't believe it's remotely dead though, because I know they're doing restoration work on it.
Oh,
I don't know the specifics or where.
Thank you. That's good news.
And one of the things I think we've learned from seeing these salmon up in, swimming up past 82nd Avenue and I-205, and we saw the same thing back in Washington back when Mount St. Helens erupted, is salmon are a phenomenally resilient species. They can make it past stuff you can't imagine. So to call a creek dead, as soon as you bring back, you can bring creeks back to life. It just is more expensive than it is and harder to do than keeping it healthy in the first place.
Any other questions before we let Neil go? Jane.
Neil, you had mentioned the volunteer opportunity with the native plant sale, but I wasn't clear from the website where that would occur.
Oh yeah, that is going to be, it's all happening in the parking lot of the Milwaukee Lutheran Church.
Milwaukee Lutheran Church?
Yeah, which is not the church where, for those of us who know, those of us that are familiar with our office, it is, our office is at the Milwaukee Presbyterian Church. This is down the street just because it's a bigger parking lot. And I'm just going to put that link in the chat.
Thank you.
Anita.
Yeah. Did you mention something about Three Creeks in one of the slides, that there was a plan for it?
Yes, so I'll give you kind of, so the project is really being driven by the folks at Clackamas Water Environment Services, which is the owner of Three Creeks Natural Area, which is, for those of you who don't know Mount Scott Creek, it is a pretty sizable natural area where Dean Creek, Phillips Creek, and Mount Scott Creek meet. Just behind the Harmony Creek campus, Clackamas Community College and the Aquatic Park. So if you go into that parking lot and you walk down a hill, there's a fairly large natural area, and it's pretty cool. One of the challenges that Mount Scott Creek has, and this is really a challenge throughout our watershed, is flood. And people downstream of it have kind of some perpetual flooding problems. That is a result of probably back in the day, more houses being built in the floodplain that should have. And then you combine that with more impervious surface and increasingly intense winter storms, and you maybe some undersized culverts that can't pass enough water through them, and you suddenly have the recipe for people's houses to flood. And there have been some FEMA buyouts. What Wes is doing is developing a plan for really how to restore some natural floodplain connection in Three Creeks, where if the river, if the creek is allowed to naturally flood a big flat area where it historically probably always has, the flood can go there. It can create wetlands and water and good habitat and off-channel refuge for all kinds of species, and that'll give the water a place to go, so that instead it ends up there instead of in someone's basement. They are in the early design phases. In the last meeting we had on it, they would basically come up with 3 different options for, hey, what happens if we leave the channel where it is and move it back this way? What happens if we bring the channel over here and let it overflow into this area during high water? And there's going to be more work done probably over the next several months as they start to decide which option will work best. But that's basically the kind of project that they're starting to think through. Three Creek has a lot of really a couple of other important things. It's got some extremely old oak forest. That's a very rare habitat type. And one of the things we're talking with Wes about is, how do we do this project in a way that provides the flood attenuation and a healthy stream, but also really minimizes the impact on the oaks whenever you start talking about bulldozers and things like that. In a natural area, you can have some impact, and we really want to make sure we can minimize that.
Thank you.
Valerie.
Thank you. I find all of this really interesting, so thank you, Neil. I have a question. You were talking about pervious pavers and sidewalks, et cetera, that essentially allow the water to soak in and the ground to do the first phase of water cleaning. I guess I'm not very technical, so I'll put it that way. What are the drawbacks? So for example, let's say that we wanted to recommend that a development use those strategies. Is it more expensive? Is the technology not as good? Is it harder to get materials? What might be a drawback to doing that kind of work?
The biggest barrier, and it's not really a drawback, is it's a new way of thinking. When I've been in a lot of meetings with developers or about particular projects where I really just kind of pose the question of like, hey, if you built this building 3 stories instead of 2 stories, then you wouldn't create as much impervious surface, and it's a little more expensive, but it's also really expensive to put in all that stormwater treatment that they would otherwise be required to put in for that impervious surface. But it's really, to be honest, and I don't mean to sound too flippant about it, but it's not the kind of default design. that a lot of, I think, consultants and engineers kind of pull off the shelf from previous projects. So it's a new way, for some of them, it's a new way of thinking. But it also often, and it can be more expensive in the outset, but again, it is often less expensive because you then don't have to use up a bunch of your land to have a stormwater detention pond, because you don't need one because the water is just infiltrating into the soil. In some sites, not all techniques work on all sites. So if you have a, to have pervious pavement, you have to have a certain amount of soil permeability so that the ground actually can absorb that water under the pavement. So, again, sometimes sometimes it takes some investigation and some creativity. But I think the barrier really is that it isn't how most folks have usually thought about building a building, and it isn't required. In fact, most cases, it's not required that they think about it. Most of the time when you walk through the places that have pervious pavement or something of that sort, you don't even notice the difference. It just looks like pavement.
It could be something that a community or a community council might try to lift up as important. And I heard, that with the population, and we know that we're talking about, the need for a lot more housing, and a housing task force has talked about housing in the C3 zone down McLaughlin. And I'm thinking that just, compounds the surface and the surface water and the issues there, that it might be something that we could write suggesting that this be something that people are seriously asked to look at in order to protect the water in our area. So anyway, thank you. That was really helpful.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks a lot, Neil. I really appreciate you taking the time to come out here. I think we kept you even a few minutes longer than you might have been prepared for, but I appreciate it. And we look forward to having you come back.
Yeah, I saw a couple of notes in the chat, and I will, and Commissioner Savas, the county has definitely used pervious materials. There's a lot of other similar ways of doing it. There's a couple of requests for the map that we had shared, and I'll share that with folks as well. Thank you so much for having me. It's always happy to come talk to folks, and have a good rest of your meeting.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Neil. We'll make sure to get the information that you shared with us in our follow-up newsletter.
Thank you.
Okay. With that, we're going to jump back into my presentation. And we're going to jump into the LUART portion of the evening, and we'll really tonight just be looking at one land use application that's pending. We've been referring to it as the Whipple subdivision. It has an address on Oatfield, and so here's where that is. See, I'm going to close my chat window. Valerie, could you let me know if anyone tries to chat while I'm presenting? So here's McLaughlin Boulevard. Let's see, Rothy Road is here, Naif Road is here, and so like the post office site, it would be right over here. So up here on Oatfield on the slope is the site that we're talking about. Currently developed with one house that takes access from Oatfield. And it's a very heavily forested site. They're proposing a 12-lot subdivision. We took a brief look at this last month. Here's the proposed plan, proposed site plan, a little bit closer look. There'll be a new private street that stubs out to provide access to these lots, the lots backing up to the slope, as well as these other interior lots. And last time we also highlighted the tree removal plan because it's very unsparing. And so anyway, we took a look, we had a LUART meeting, we took a look at this. I'm sorry, I meant to prepare a slide with all of our LUART volunteers' names, but we've had input on this one from Bob Bohannon, as well as our board members, Rich and Mark, and also from some of the neighbors. We've had some input, and so and then also Will Farley helped us with this as well. So here was the key issues that we identified in the sections of code, that apply to those. This was these subdivision applications are huge and they're very difficult to work through. So one of the things that we came up with as a suggestion is to actually come up with a tree preservation plan with the steep slopes. And there's several, oak trees, and we believe Oregon white oaks on the site that are species of concern. There's also going to be undeveloped right-of-way along Oatfield or unimproved right-of-way along Oatfield that the applicant will be dedicating that could probably preserve some trees. Near the outer property lines could preserve some trees, and then also, perhaps the stormwater tract up here at the intersection. And then frankly, between each of the lots, there's opportunities to preserve some trees. And so that's all highlighted here in green a little bit, where we see kind of the opportunities to save some of the trees. And so we're going to recommend that, or what we're recommending, what LUART's recommending to you is that we recommend this as a condition to try to save a lot of the trees on the site. And I'll get into partially why that's important on this site here in just a minute. One of the other issues that came up in our discussion is making sure that the intersection at Whipple and Gordon, which comes out of the high school property just a little bit to the south. There's a lot of pedestrian traffic here with high school kids, and so we want to make sure that they specifically are taking care to design this intersection so that everybody that walks or drives or bikes through here is safe when they do so. One of the major flaws that this application had that was identified, or that we were able to identify with the help of a neighbor, is that the geotechnical report analysis is based, analysis and recommendations are based on a proposal for 6 to 10 dwellings, and the applicant proposes 12. And so the recommendation is in the report that if any of these proposed conditions change, that they should be contacted to modify the report. And so that should absolutely be required as a condition of approval. They absolutely need to go back and get this report updated for the proper, what is actually being proposed. And this is really important because of the findings in the geotechnical report, which I'm going to go through here in just a second. But there was one alternative that we identified is, although it's procedurally complicated, I will acknowledge, is that there could, the applicant could amend their proposal to 10 lots perhaps, and then the geotechnical report that they have in hand would already be applicable. But for the most likely what the county will require is that they update the report with more detailed information based on the current proposal, and we just want to make sure that we're identifying that because the findings could be different, for additional impervious surface in this area. Now, the reason why this is important, this site is in an ancient landslide area, and the actual this is landslide topography. The report, the geotechnical report describes that it is within a mapped landslide area, and that historically with construction in such areas, there is always an inherent and high risk associated with ground movement and related structural damage. Additionally, the report says that the landslide terrain in the vicinity area are such that under normal conditions, there exists some potential for a future global slope failure, which is a very catastrophic type of landslide in a dense suburban neighborhood. Based on the geographic location and the geological hazards in the area on Oatfield Ridge, and modifications by roads and other development, and also that it could be undermined if more of these things occur, and that includes forest loss. And we're looking at a site that is heavily forested and proposed to be completely cleared of trees. And so that would be the very definition of forest loss at this site. And so in the opinion of the geotechnical report authors, the life safety risk to the occupants from such a slide can be accurately determined only by performing an extensive study involving extensive subsurface explorations and other technical exploration and analysis. So we think that this should absolutely be required as a condition of approval. There's no reason why this kind of exploration shouldn't be required when you're talking about such a high hazard. Further, the conclusions of the report, there's a high potential for shallow as well as deep slope stability failures if this geotechnical oversight is not used and if their recommendations are not implemented. So this is absolutely a must that the applicant, the developer, as this goes forward, must absolutely follow to the letter these recommendations to preserve the safety of the occupants and the surrounding area. There's other other findings that really talk about how dangerous this area is for development, and that ultimately the standard that they would use to measure global stability is inadequate for the post-construction scenario. They just say that flat out. It's inadequate for the post-construction scenario. So that means that when this site is developed as proposed, that it will be inherently unsafe for the occupants. So that's really we haven't quite seen findings this stark in these kinds of reports before. We don't, and so this is kind of an outstanding scenario. But ultimately, there's no criteria in here that allows for denial based on this. So our recommended conditions, as far as this is concerned, is that they have to strictly comply with the recommendations of the geotechnical experts. They absolutely need to do further exploration of the subsurface hazards to determine the life safety risk and appropriate mitigation. And they honestly need to look at how they can preserve enough of the mature trees to reduce forest loss to be able to mitigate and help manage the high water table that is part of the risk, part of the major risk at this site of incurring a major landslide. So this is all very serious, and it deserves our attention. Lastly, neighbors near the site have reported that there are seasonal streams and wetlands on the site. And this is contrary to the applicant's narrative. And so we recommend that a wetland and water course survey be conducted during the wet season to identify if there are any water quality resources on the site, because then a water quality resource area development permit would be required in that case. So to revisit, we had 5 key issues that we identified, and then we came up with this pretty jam-packed list of recommended conditions of approval. In our analysis, we were unable to identify any criteria that would likely lead the county to justify a denial. And so in order to be most effective in our recommendations, we recommended that approval with the conditions of approval as recommended by LUART, which was that kind of laundry list that we went through. Now, I'm a little breathless after all of that, but I will respond to questions because this is this is a little different than the implications, I think, of this are a little bit different. So I'm happy to respond to any questions anyone might have. Valerie.
Okay, so I understand the recommendations. Is it possible when you do a letter that we could make the recommendation that they not build on this piece of property? But we are aware of that. We can say that our preference would be that they not build on this piece of property. However, these are the recommendations that would align with what the county regulations are, because it makes no sense to me. I mean, we have seen geological tragedy after geological tragedy. And here's a space where you have the chance to actually say, no, this is not stable land. Why would we, I can't see wanting to recommend that. And the other thing that it just juxtaposed in my mind is that picture that Neil showed us with a way of saving a lot of trees on a piece of property and having the same number of dwelling places. It makes no sense to me. It seems like you could build dwelling places without disturbing that much ground. So that's my thought into this.
Yeah, and to respond to that a little bit more in a kind of a technical way, there was a property that was a little bit further south on McNary that there was a proposed subdivision, and we went through that review a couple years ago. That actually was touched by a piece of mapped protected open space on the county's comprehensive plan map, and that kind of gave us an angle into trying to force, kind of a more protection of that open. It didn't work. But we did have, that was a lever that the code actually gave us to try to use. Whereas here we don't even have that, it's a high hazard zone, and that's really the reason why it shouldn't be developed. But it's not mapped as protected open space, even though it probably should be, because it's a high hazard zone with a really high water table and really is an ancient landslide mass. And so. But that's not something that you can push upon, force upon, a property owner. It has to be, maybe Commissioner Savis might have different input into how the board could act on something like that, but I don't believe under the current property rights models and everything that we could prevent this property from being developed, basically, under the current code. Even though I agree, I really struggled with this one because, I know how these things go, and I want to be really effective in trying to, make sure that whatever does happen is as safe as it can possibly be, but this one was tough because each finding from the geotech report just seemed to be more serious than the last. And it just really doesn't strike me that this piece of property should be developed, but I don't see that as an outcome that's available to us. Before I get to Casey, I did see that Mark had raised his hand before I answered Valerie's question. So Mark, could you please?
I want to say I agree with what Valerie was saying earlier. It's not sensible to me at all. But after the property in question is right on my south edge of my home. What I struggle with is the same thing, the scientific results and the evidence of the ancient slide zone and all that stuff. It all factors together with my lack of understanding of why they want to take all the trees. It's an old oak grove. All of us live in the surrounding area. It's an old oak grove. And it just doesn't make any sense to take everything. If they want to put 6 to 10, fine. If they're going to put 12, we probably can't stop it. I know the state wants it. I know the county wants it. I know the developer wants it. So the likelihood of it stopping it, even for these valid reasons that you guys have presented, I think it's very unlikely that we can stop it. But maybe some of these things will help prevent the total clear cutting of the trees, and that would help alleviate all the things that a lot of people here already have water problems in their homes and under their homes and stuff in the surrounding older neighborhood that's here. So yeah, I'm baffled. It's baffled as Valerie or anybody else here that the county would just approve clear cutting the whole thing. And I'm big on private property rights. I mean, if you own a piece of ground, I think you should be able to do what you want with it, essentially. But I don't understand the mentality of someone who would just say, let's decimate it. I don't want to abolish this guy's development or even stop it, But by the same token, I don't want him abolishing my neighborhood as it's been for 100 years or so. So yeah,
I mean, there's a balance. What we're able to do here is try to try to balance out the
Right.
property rights with the impacts,
Right.
and when those impacts are actually dangerous, that's where I think we might have additional leverage. But
so you're thinking
also
we might have a chance of reducing from 12 maybe down to 10 and leaving some trees.
In my estimation, what would probably be the best thing for this site under the current code, because the problem, part of the procedural difficulty here, the procedural complication that I mentioned earlier, is that the minimum required density for this parcel is 11 units. And so he needs to provide at least 11 lots, and can't go back down to 10, which is where that, and
because of the rezoning, it used to be zoned 10 here. Now it's 8,500 because of that.
Right. Yeah. So because of the zoning regulations, and then the minimum density for the site is 10.9 houses or lots, and so it's that rounds to 11. So he has to do 11 under the current code without getting a variance. You could probably get a variance to that minimum standard and reduce it to 10. But again, that's procedurally challenging, and I don't know that could be compelled. So anyway, the next option would be a planned unit development, which is where I think about a third of the site would get protected as open space, and then he'd get the 12 lots. They would just be concentrated on the site in a way that protects, more of a contiguous area of trees. And so that would be probably what I would recommend if we changed the recommendations here, is to recommend a planned unit development that would try to preserve a contiguous stand of trees on the site. So see more questions lining up. Casey, you were first, and then I see you, Jenna. You'll be up. Casey?
Hi guys. Yeah, I think you guys know my take on this. Is I certainly think that we need some sort of overlay, basically anything west of the 205. And I know that the county has their thing, but the reality is that if they wanted to make it happen, they can make it happen. Secondarily, I think that we should probably be looking at these, and when I say we, technically the county, proactively on how can we leverage maybe North Clackamas Parks, local state government, federal agencies to sort of say, hey, here's an area where someone's trying to develop. Are there park funds available to say, like, okay, instead of the 12 lots, maybe they do the 10, but we save 2 of them for a local park for that particular area, right? And we find the funds to where this particular builder can still make whatever margins they need to make, but we're still saving some areas. I think that the county government has a role there in being more proactive. And I would encourage our group to encourage the county and say something along those lines. It's beyond just simply saying no to this particular zoning, or saying, hey, here are the recommendations for this zoning or what we can do, but what is the county doing proactively to sort of help facilitate making sure that these green spaces are saved. And then thirdly, and my last point is that I remember seeing this lot go for sale a while ago, and it was a concern for me because I saw the forest land, and I saw some signs said something about like possible division, or for me, I think that if it's possible legally for this group to get ahead of and start looking and using tools like Zillow and saying, okay, here are the potential properties within our area that are going for sale or on the market. And potentially even speaking with the folks that are selling that land and working with them to say, okay, on the basis of you selling, when they're selling the land, say, okay, we're selling this land, but you cannot, take away the trees or something, right? You can make that a condition of the sale. And I don't know the legality of whether we're able to speak with a property owner and say, hey, do you mind putting these sort of stipulations into your sale before it even goes on the market, or even if it's on the market, as a part of the condition of the sale. And then at that point, when a builder comes in, they can see that and say, okay, we want to save that. Because I think a lot of times the folks that are selling the property you know, they do have some sort of connection to the neighborhood, right? And so, but once they sell it, it's someone else's deal, and someone else comes in and moves on with it. So I would encourage the group maybe to start looking at sort of the properties as they go on sale, instead of looking at these on the back end. That's all I got.
Thanks, Casey.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jenna, you were up next. Did you want to add anything, Jenna?
Sorry, I might have missed something, but earlier in the meeting, I thought you said that you guys don't have any like governance. You're just coming up with recommendations right now? Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Bob, you're up next, and then Commissioner Savas.
Okay, yeah, I kind of agree with everything you said, Joseph. One thing I might add that kind of dawned on me is, yeah, that most likely they're going to go through and redo that geotechnical report to update it so they can get their additional lots in. One thing that we might be sure that we get in the paperwork and stressing is that the geotechnical report also take into account the large removal of all those trees, because it's based now on the trees that are there. Those trees are holding the ground in place, absorbing a gob of water. So when you go to remove those, that geotechnical report needs to take into account that 80 or 90 or 95% of those trees are going to be gone. So it's actually going to make that site even more unstable and dangerous. So just kind of my 2 cents, that we need to make sure that geotechnical report is updated to reflect the fact that they're going to remove a bunch of trees. So.
Thanks, Bob. Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, thank you, Joseph, for your work on this and your detailed explanation. As a member of this community council since 1987, 97, 24 years now, you know, we've been through similar items, and of course they're all unique to some degree, but we've had similar arguments and a lot of anguish over development that happens. The county's role in this is through transportation and development, the permitting department. That's its role, and there are procedures and processes that are in place for everyone to engage in somewhat else along the way. Mark, thank you for being here today. I appreciate our conversation. I'm glad you're here. And you and I have spoken about this to some degree. With that, all that said, I do want to say that the county cannot veer from state land use laws. And so if the county was to veer away from something that we are an agent of the state, it goes to the State Land Use Board of Appeals, or the developer themselves, the property owner can sue the county or whatnot. There are avenues that has happened. And, you know, so we have learned over the years, for decades, we've learned where we've tried to be considerate of a particular position and lost. So our staff are pretty well trained. The way the system works is we recognize that everything outside the urban growth boundary is what's being protected for the most part, and what's being sacrificed is everything within the urban growth boundary. That's a lot to say, but I have to be extremely careful that if this does ever come back to the Board of County Commissioners, for say, if there's something out of the process, because we have a hearings officer that actually decides these things. But if it comes back, I have to be careful that I'm expressing my neutrality at this point, so that I'm not forced to sit aside and not actually participate in any future discussions should this come to the Board of County Commissioners. So I have to be impartial, and if I can add anything else, I will. But I just wanted to comment that, let people know that our staff have to follow the state land use laws.
Thank you, Commissioner. Valerie.
Thank you, Commissioner Savas. I appreciate your making that statement. And then on the, just for us as a community council, I don't think it hurts for us to preface what we recommend. I think the recommended conditions are what we have to recommend. But I think that we can preface that. And there's a couple of things in there for me. It doesn't make any sense to me that we treat every piece of land as if it's exactly the same. If you've got something on a slope that can cause danger to residents and to what any kind of structure that's being built, it seems to me that that should be taken into consideration. I understand that it may be really complicated to be running around and looking at every place, but I think that's why these surveys, like the one that was done, were done. And it seems that in the end, it would be helpful if there was a way to make the statement that permitting ought to make sense in light of some of these scientific studies that are done. So if there's a way for us to write a letter and preface it with some of this information that we all know, I mean, I'm sitting here, I'm thinking, this is nonsense. We have seen what landslides do. So we know this. So it doesn't make sense to just approve it without saying, well, here's the conditions. This is what we'd like. We do get the law. We understand that we're part of the state, et cetera. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't keep raising red flags and saying that someone should pay attention to this.
Do I hear the basis for a motion?
I would move that we write a letter that expresses our concerns that's attached to our recommendation letter.
I'd happily second that.
We will need a voting member to second that. I'm sorry, Mark. Thank you, though. Are there any voting members who would like to second?
I'll second that. This is Rich.
Rich, thank you, Rich. So is a motion by Valerie and a second by Rich. Is there any further discussion before? Commissioner Savas, your hand is still raised. Oh, okay, very good. Any other comments before we take a vote? And I think that we need to do a roll call vote. So Danielle, I'm going to ask you to read the names of the voting members in attendance and then record their vote.
Okay.
And so take it away.
Hey, Joseph, can we get a clarification on what we're actually voting for?
Yeah, I'm going to read it.
Letter?
Yeah.
Yep, I have the motion by Valerie, seconded by Rich, is to write a letter to express concerns regarding development, which will be attached to the recommendation.
So that is the LUART recommendation and recommended conditions of approval with the added introductory statements around our concerns about trying to preserve the site and the trees on the site and whatever parks opportunities there might be. We can definitely work that kind of stuff in, but generally about trying to our concerns about the site.
Yeah. So I did also add in the property address 16305 Southeast Oakfield Road, so we're not having any confusion on where we're voting on. Okay.
Right.
All right. Does anyone need any more clarifications? Okay. And then if I don't call your name and you are a voting member or you believe that you are, let me know. I believe I got everybody as they entered and if they were a little late, but otherwise, if not, let me know. Anata Blackmar.
Yes.
Robert Bohannon.
Yes.
Pat Callender.
Yes.
Sue Conachan.
Yes.
Dave Joback.
Yes.
Is Jan there with you?
No.
Okay. Jean Fifield.
Yes.
Mark Knudsen.
I'll abstain.
Leon Miller.
Yes.
Paul Savas.
Abstain.
Okay. Casey Snowberger.
Abstain.
Baldwin Vander Beal. I'm sorry, I know I said that wrong.
Yes.
Suzanne Wolf. Oh, sorry, Suzanne Wolf. Next time we can catch you. Jason Schreppel. Okay, do I see Jason on? Okay.
I didn't see him on
Okay.
right now, but
Okay. Yeah, I did capture that in the beginning. I'll
Okay.
capture my own vote as yes. Joseph Edge, I know you don't typically vote. Would you care to
correct.
vote? Okay.
No.
Mark Elliott,
Yes.
Rich Nippon,
Yes.
Valerie Chapman,
Yes.
Jane Civiletti,
Yes, and I also wonder if you had polled Tom Hogan, who is on.
I did not capture Tom Hogan in the
Oh, he's not here now.
attendance.
No, I'm
Oh, no,
here.
you are. Tom is here.
Okay,
I'm here.
Tom Hogan.
Yes.
Yes, and then I have Linda's iPad, which we think is Linda Seals. If that's you, can you let us know and vote?
It's Linda Newblum.
Linda Newblum, okay.
Yes.
Let me,
And I vote yes also.
okay, you are a voting member. I can see that. Okay. I got you as for attendance as well. Okay, are there any voting members who I did not call on, or that if you're not sure of your status? Okay,
Awesome. Thanks.
I'm going to
Danielle.
give you the count right now. 15 yes. 3 abstain, no no's.
Okay. Well, very good. Thanks to everybody. And just really quick, I'm going to jump back into my presentation. I know we're running late. I appreciate the extra conversation on this. The hearing for this is actually next Wednesday. Sorry about that. I didn't mean to go away from it. It'll be on Zoom, and we can all attend if we want to. Anyone can submit testimony, either in writing or in person, or live, I should say, through the Zoom meeting. And so again, that will be on September 29th at 9:30 a.m. And we'll send out this link so that anyone who wants to join will know exactly how and when to do that. So again, thanks everybody. So we have some committee updates. I'd like to first start off by handing it over to Mark Knudsen with Oak Lodge Water Services.
Great. Thank you very much, Joseph. Just a very quick update. Some of you know that Oak Lodge Water Services Board has been working on a process to migrate the district from a special district into a different form of governance called an authority. And it would be essentially the same organization with the same customer base and the same assets and the same rates, but under state law, it would be formed as an authority rather than a district. That has some significant benefits to the organization in terms of preserving the existing customer base and preserving the assets, and those things allow us to do better long-term planning and establish more predictable long-term rates. So
it's a fairly, pardon me, long and somewhat arduous process, but the good news is a couple of very important events happened in the last month. Part of that process requires that the cities that might be served in part by that authority essentially express concurrence with proceeding with the formation of the authority. In our case, that would be the cities of Gladstone and the cities of Milwaukee, since we serve a small number of customers in each of those cities. And the good news is in the last month, both city councils have passed resolutions that express concurrence with proceeding with the formation of an authority. So that was a big step forward for us. We're very enthused about that. And so the next step is to begin further conversations, additional outreach with the community, as well as additional time spent with the County Board of Commissioners, and beginning to now work the formal part of the process in terms of potentially creating that authority. So that was really the goal of tonight, is to just simply let you know that we've made a couple of steps forward. Very good news. And Joseph has agreed to tolerate me coming back on December 1st, and I'll probably have a PowerPoint presentation that will only last at least 45 minutes or so. And we'll talk more about the gory details of why an authority is in what we believe is the community's best interest, and we'll share that. But tonight, we just wanted to sort of acknowledge that we've made a couple of very important steps forward, and we look forward to sharing more information on December 1st. Thank you.
That'll be perfect holiday fare. Guian, do you have a question for Mark?
Is that a decision that the board can make, or would that go to a vote of the district?
So the answer is yes. Our understanding is the Board of County Commissioners has the authority to pass that and make that as essentially an administrative order to form the authority. Although there is, again, it's a fairly long process. It involves multiple public hearings, as well as essentially getting blessing from Metro. But that said, they do have that authority, but they also have the authority to refer it to the voters. And so it could go either way. And that's part of the ongoing conversation with the commissioners.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Mark. We look forward to having you back in December, or on December 1st. And so up next, I believe we have Rich with the update from CERT.
Hi, first of all, let me thank Greg Wennison, who's our CERT leader, because he prepared this report. He says 2021 has been mostly COVID test and vac support. Oak Lodge CERT with Milwaukee, Portland net spent over 1,800 hours supporting COVID testing and vac public clinics held by the Clackamas Public County and Clackamas Fire District. Our public training, activities, and team training have been limited due to distancing. We were able to do certification classes in CPR, AED, and in first aid before the Delta variant closed things back up. We are being careful, as many of our members are age 60 plus. We do provide CERT basic training through an FEMA approved online University of Utah class. And we have added 5 members through the online classes. Our primary training and exercise has been in communications. We were able to get 20 GMRS personal radios through a UASI FEMA grant, Urban Area Security Initiative, provided through the Clackamas Fire District. We also just received word that we'll probably get a $1,200 grant for a GMRS repeater. The grant originates from the Halloran Foundation and is through Milwaukee CERT and Milwaukee Public Safety Foundation. The GMRS repeater will allow our teams to communicate from North Oak Grove down to Gladstone. The repeater will be mounted on the top of the Rosevilla main building, and Rosevilla has agreed to provide 120 volt AC power. Thank you to the Halloran Foundation and to Rosevilla. The FEMA grant is a one-time event, as is the Halloran grant. Otherwise, we are self-funded, so any financial contributions are welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Rich. Danielle, question?
Yes, Rich, I was curious, you mentioned donations are welcome. Is there an email or any contact information I can include in the notes for folks?
There's not a website, there's a email address, and I'll send it to you to put in the notes.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Concord School update, Mark, and I believe that you might have some slides about the Concord School this time.
Thank you. Yes, I do. And let's see if I can get this to work. So I wanted to just speak just briefly on some updates to the Concord School project. And this is based on a district advisory committee meeting for the NCPRD district that was held about 2 weeks ago. I pulled some of the slides from that presentation that I thought might be of interest to the group. So first is just kind of a review that this is the Concord School property that's located at Concord, just above McLaughlin. It's a joint project with the Board of County Commissioners at the NCPRD and the library group. And the site includes both a community center, a library, the NCPRD administrative offices, and a park. So I put this slide together just having to do with where the project stands as far as its budget and its funding sources. So I've broken this down into the county library portion and also the community center, park, and NCPRD offices. So NCPRD reported that early estimates sent this year that were approved by the Board of County Commissioners earlier this year, the library was approved for a budget of around $13.7 million. The most recent estimate done at the end of schematic design raised that estimate to $14.5 million. There are currently about $14.4 million in sources to build the library. And so there's a slight gap in between the sources and the current estimate. From the community center and park side, the estimates at the beginning of this year and what was approved through by the BCC was the $23.8 million for those portions of the project. The estimate now has grown to $32.3 million. Of that, the funding sources, there is currently around $22 million identified as available sources, with about a $10.3 million gap. So at this point right now, the project is going through some, it's been put on hold briefly so that NCPRD can come up with some strategies to fill that funding gap and that budget overflow. So here are some of the things that they identified as ways in which they might try to align the budget with the funding. First is to do some value engineering, and that usually means that you'll look at different parts of the project to see what parts that might be done in a different way in order to make it less expensive. Another way is to look at ways in which the scope of the project can be reduced. That could be in building area, that could be in the development of the park or the infrastructure, or other ways that the scope could be reduced to reduce the overall cost. Another option is a strategic phasing. So there are different parts of the project that include both new buildings as well as renovation of the existing building. So phasing might mean that parts of the existing building might not be built out at this time. It might be waiting until another time when additional funding sources are available. And then the final one is to look at some additional funding sources beyond those that have been identified for the project so far. So what NCPRD has identified as what the next steps is. First, they have hired and are contracting for a CMGC, that's a construction management general contractor, that will oversee and build the project and also assist the county and NCPRD in looking at the project again to look whether that current estimate is accurate and correct, and to make recommendations on ways in which they might save money. Second is they'll develop various funding strategies over the next 2 months, and then next present options and recommendations to the Board of County Commissioners and the NCPRD board by around mid-November, and then proceed into the next phase of design or design development based on the decisions made by the board. So as my understanding at this point is that the architects and the engineering team are put on hold until these 4 steps are completed, which would probably mean in the best scenario that the work would be back, the engineers and architects would be back at work around the first of the year. So I think that's about all I wanted to present, and I'm happy to answer any questions anyone has.
Mark, I see you have your hand raised.
Hi, Mark. Mark Chalinsky here. I'm a newbie to Zoom and a newbie to the group here. So this is great news. You and other folks have been working to preserve and somewhat resurrect Concord Elementary School. That's news to me, and extremely good news. I want to thank you for the efforts you're making to do that. Both my kids went there, and it's nice to see that someone is. So does it look like the building itself will be saved to some measure and put to use?
Yes, the current proposal is that the entire building will be saved. It will be retrofitted, or let me say it's going to be made, it's going to be remodeled to make it earthquake proof and to meet current codes for earthquake seismic, yeah. As well as mechanical, electrical, plumbing requirements for the building. The building is being, the use of the building has been changed from an educational facility to a public facility. So the codes are a little different for those two different uses.
And it
But
sounds
yes,
like
the existing building has been saved.
and there's prospective new building too, it sounds like, new structures.
Yes, yes, there's an addition that's being added to it for the library portion, and also an addition for a new gymnasium.
Huh. All right, well, thanks. I appreciate the effort and the information. Thank you.
Mark, if you want to give your email address to Danielle in the chat, we'll make sure to sign you up for our newsletter, and you can, we'll make sure that we send out information about this project and follow-up email.
I'll try that. Thanks.
All right. All right. Well, thanks a lot, Mark. I really appreciate the update on that. And I'd like to ask Valerie, do we have anything from the Economic Development Commission this morning?
Of course, we're running late and it was really a packed meeting this morning. So I will condense a lot of what I want to do. First of all, I want to say the good news is where we have recovered about 72% of jobs that were lost in the spring of 2020. So we're 72% back. We have 2 major hindrances, and I'm doing this all very quickly, but the first one is that there are not enough people. There's not enough people to hire. So there's a desperation to hire people. And there's a lot of reasons around that. But one reason that was highlighted, and I think that would be helpful for us to hold in mind, is that many of the jobs, the wages and the jobs that are going without people filling them are low wage jobs. And it's very expensive to live around here. So those 2 things are working against each other right now. The other piece is that is a childcare issue. So just to help people know, give you some perspective, pre-pandemic, there were about 10,000 slots, if you will, or places for children as far as childcare. So we could care for 10,000 children total. That's all the preschoolers, that's all the after-school care. And you think about how big Clackamas County is. 10,000 is nothing. It is really a childcare desert. At this point, there are only 8,000 slots left. So we have people that are quitting their jobs at this point. And I know for a fact, you know, just because I follow this as a woman, that a lot of women are being forced back out of the labor market. There's no stability in the schools right now. If the school like Gladstone took a 2-week hiatus, those children have to be cared for by somebody. So there are people that are, you know, they can't get back in to the workforce. So those are two issues that the county is really paying attention to. And there was a lot more that could be said about this. It was a very interesting meeting. EDC meetings happen at 7:30 in the morning on the very same day as our community council meeting. So a lot of information. So that's what I want to give you tonight.
Awesome. Thanks, Valerie. Yeah, always nice for a long day for Valerie because of starting at 7:30 for that and ending at 9 for this. So thanks. We really appreciate your updates from that.
Joseph, I just want to say, I usually get to say hello, good morning to Commissioner Savas. And then I see him in the evening and, you know, can say, hey, saw you this morning.
Well, I appreciate your updates from the EDC. It's good information to get. Our next committee update is Anita from NCPRD from the District Advisory Committee.
I've also had a long day today. I'm a little bleary and I'm trying to shorten what I was going to say. So, but basically these days there's a big effort to ramp up public involvement with North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District. And part of that is to get in each sub area a parks board set up. And that was what was envisioned in the original 1990 Measure 3-1 that created the NCPRD. And with that in mind, I realized, oh, Milwaukee has its own parks board already. I could start going to their meetings, see how they operate and learn some things. So I'm going to be going to their meetings each month. And I went to the first one today. And part of what they were dealing with was NCPRD's use of pesticides and herbicides or cutting back on that use. And the city setting its own policies about that. Also, some news about funding for 3 smaller parks in Milwaukee that are going to get makeovers or get developed. And one of these parks is the one that's at the Letting Library. And I thought it was such a great thing to learn that they're thinking of this in terms of it not just being a park, but being a park that's specifically suitable to being at a library, and that they want to use it as a sort of educational area. You could have nature education there, you could have science education, you could have things that relate to fantasy books in the library. And it's just a new idea that was being expressed. It wasn't fully fleshed out, but it made me think about the Concord Library project and how that park could really be something that's uniquely suited to being by a library instead of just being a nice park. I've also gotten input, some passionate input from a neighbor who says that park at the Concord Center should be a world-class park, not just a ho-hum park or not just a nice park, that this should be something that really sets us up to say, we're doing something really special for our community. And that when it comes time to ask for a bond measure or a raise in taxes, if people are enamored over some of the parks we've created, then maybe they'll be more willing to pay some more taxes, because right now the Parks District has one of the lowest levels of taxation revenue compared to other communities around here. And so, what else? As for the goal of a park at New Urban High School, I got together with 2 other DAC members about a week ago just to look at the site and also look at the little Bunnell property in Oak Grove, which NCP already owns, but which hasn't been developed yet. And the whole New Urban High School park plan went into cold storage when Scott Archer, the former director of NCPRD, left his position, and the principal at New Urban High left his position. So anyway, we want to revive it. And today I sent a letter to the director, the new director at NCPRD, asking for the information that the former director had put in some notes somewhere. So I hope to be able to let you know how that turns out next time. And there's also a flurry of upset today and in the last few days about something that happened not in River Villa Park itself, but just north of the train trestle there. Somebody has installed a cyclone fence that runs east-west from the high water line down into the river. And a lot of people are up in arms about it and saying this is state land if it's below the high water mark, and that it will be dangerous when the water rises, and then you won't be able to see this fence in there until you hit it if you're in a kayak or swimming or something. So a lot of people have contacted the Oregon Department of State Lands and haven't gotten anything official about whether the fence is illegal or not. But Tanya Williamson at NCPRD said that the jurisdiction might be under the county itself, and that you could contact Steve Hanska at stevehahn@clackamas.us, who works for the county, to see if it's a county jurisdiction. So
it is. It's a violation of the floodplain code.
okay. Well, Joseph, I thought you might know. So yeah, there's a little ambiguity coming from the State Department, but if that's the case, a lot of people will be really relieved if that fence is removed. It just went up a few days ago. So basically,
yeah, so there's the county has a code enforcement form that you can submit, suspected violations of county code too. And so we can share that link with everybody, which we like to do periodically because it's a useful resource.
Oh, that would be great. Yes, that would be wonderful. Okay, glad to hear that. Thank you. So
Sure
basically that's it for me tonight, except that the DAC meeting is on October 13th, 5:30 to 7:30 by Zoom, and the link and the agenda aren't finalized yet. They will be posted on the NCPRD's website, and when they are, I'll ask you guys to send out a notification along with an email address for getting in touch with all of us DAC members, and also a distribution list address for people who want to sign up for park news and volunteer opportunities.
Anata, I
Awesome, thank
apologize.
you.
Can you tell me again the next DAC meeting, October
Sure.
15th? At
October 13th, 5:30 to 7:30.
Thank you.
And something will go out to the OGCC, I assume, when we get the agenda. And the link.
Awesome, thank you. Let's see. I know we're running really late. I appreciate everyone sticking around. We've got a couple more quick updates, and then we'll be able to let you go. So Tom, you have an update from the Oak Lodge Governance Project.
Thanks, Joseph. I'm Tom Civiletti. I'm a member of the steering committee of the Oak Lodge Governance Project, and I'm here with good news. The study that was made possible by a grant from Metro is almost complete. And barring unforeseen circumstances, we will have it up on our website by the 1st of October. And I'm putting the web address of our website up in chat now. So on the 1st, you should be able to access the report and read it. On October 9th, we are planning to have an information Zoom webinar about the report. And you'll be able to access the link to register for that on the website. We're also on our pages on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. You can also subscribe to our email list, which would also send you the link as soon as we have it. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Nope, I think everyone's ready to go. Thanks a lot, Tom. I appreciate the quick update there. We'll make sure to let everyone know, when that's available. We'll share the link, and we'll also share the link to the upcoming meeting next month when that becomes available. Valerie, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, it's always nice to let people know what's going to happen at their many meetings next month. And next month, we will have people from the Oak Lodge Governance Project coming to our community council meeting to help share some of that information about that report and other things that are going on. So just to let people know.
Awesome, thanks to you both. And just really briefly, the update from the Pedestrian Bikeway Advisory Committee, which I'm a member for the county. The county got funding for their Bike Walk Clackamas planning project, which is the first time in over 20 years that the bicycle and pedestrian plan for the county will be updated. And so a lot has changed in that time, and it'll be important for us all to get involved in that. They'll actually be creating a new ABC, new advisory committee for that project. So we'll make sure everyone knows when that recruitment for that begins. Speaking of, here are the current recruitments for advisory boards at the committee or at the county. There's one that's due tomorrow, which is the Tourism Advisory Council, or Tourism Development Council is actually due tomorrow. And then the rest of these we'll make sure that we send out in our email newsletter. So any announcements from the floor? Mark.
Yes, I did want to let people know that as far as your ability to be on some of the task force for the county Parks Department still has one opening, on their advisory board that has not been filled. There will be another announcement coming out here soon for that position to be filled by anyone who might be interested. So if they're just look for those recruitment announcements on the Clackamas County website.
Cool, thanks, Mark. Any other announcements? Okay, well, our schedule review is as such. Our next meeting is October 27th, as Valerie foreshadowed. That'll be the Oak Lodge Governance Project report presentation. December 1st will be our combined November-December meeting, and that's, as Mark Newton foreshadowed, that will be the Oak Lodge Water Services Authority presentation. And then our first meeting of the new year will be January 26th. And then we have a board meeting coming up on October 4th. And that's it. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for sticking around for an extra long meeting. I appreciate it. So Valerie, feel free to stop recording.